I found something on our security camera that made my stomach drop, but what happened next was something I never could have predicted. My name is Bennett, and I run a small landscaping business here in Oregon. For 8 years, I thought I knew exactly who I was married to. Emmy and I met at a community barbecue back when I was still recovering from my first marriage, a short, painful chapter one rarely think about anymore. That first marriage had lasted barely 2 years, ending when I realized we'd rushed into something neither of us was ready for. We were young, impulsive, and completely incompatible. The divorce was amicable, at least, and we went our separate ways without much drama. When I met Emmy 3 years later, everything felt different. She was warm, attentive, and seemed to genuinely care about building a life together. She had this way of making me feel seen, like I mattered in ways I hadn't experienced before. We'd talk for hours about our dreams, our fears, our plans for the future. She wanted a family, stability, someone who'd be there for her. I wanted the same things. It felt like fate had given me a second chance. We dated for a year before I proposed at the same park where we'd first really talked, just the two of us, after that barbecue. She cried when I got down on one knee, and I remember thinking I'd finally found the person I was meant to be with. We married in a small ceremony with close friends and family, nothing extravagant, just genuine and full of hope. We had our son, Owen, 6 years ago, and Emmy stayed home to raise him while I built up the business from nothing. Those early years were hard, long hours, financial stress, the constant worry about making payroll and keeping clients happy. But Emmy supported me through it all, or so I thought. She'd have dinner ready when I got home, would listen to me vent about difficult customers, would tell me she believed in what I was building. Owen was a bright spot in our lives, a beautiful, curious kid who loved digging in the dirt with me on weekends and asking a million questions about why grass was green and how worms breathed. I built my business one lawn at a time, expanding from residential yards to small commercial properties. By year 5 of our marriage, I had 3 employees and enough steady contracts to feel secure. By year 7, I was bidding on municipal projects and had established a reputation for quality work. Emmy seemed proud of what we'd accomplished together. She'd bragged to her friends about the business, about our house, about the life we were creating for Owen. I thought we were happy. I thought we were building something that would last. The crack in our foundation started on a Tuesday afternoon in July. I was at a job site in the suburbs, installing an irrigation system for a client's backyard. It was hot, one of those oppressive summer days where the heat shimmers off the pavement and you can't drink water fast enough. My crew and I had been working since 7 that morning, and we were making good progress. The client was a retired couple who wanted their garden to thrive without the hassle of manual watering, and I was proud of the system we'd designed for them. I was on my knees, connecting a valve to the main line, when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. I was covered in dirt, my hands were wet, and I was in the middle of something technical. But I glanced at the screen and saw Owen's name flashing, which was unusual. He rarely called me during work hours. Emmy usually handled everything at home, and Owen knew I was busy during the day. Something in my gut told me to answer. I wiped my hands on my jeans and swiped to accept the call. "Hey buddy, what's up? Daddy." His voice was small, hesitant, almost a whisper. I stood up, my full attention now on the phone. "Yeah, it's me. Everything okay?" There was a pause, and I could hear the television in the background, cartoons, from the sound of it. "There's a man here." My hands stopped moving. The sounds of the job site, the running water, my crew talking, the birds chirping, all faded into background noise. "What do you mean a man? Where's Mommy?" "She's in her bedroom with him. They told me to stay in the living room and watch cartoons, but..." Another pause. "I don't like it. They're being loud." Every instinct fired at once. My mind raced through possibilities, trying to make sense of what Owen was telling me. A repairman? A delivery person? But why would they be in the bedroom? And why would Owen sound so uncertain, so worried? I didn't ask questions. I didn't call Emmy first to verify what was happening. I just told Owen I was coming home, and that he should stay where he was, stay safe, and that Daddy would be there soon. I turned to my crew lead, Marcus, a reliable guy who'd been with me for 3 years. "I have to go. Family emergency. Can you finish up here?" He saw the look on my face and didn't ask questions. "Yeah, boss. Go. We've got this." I drove faster than I should have, my mind spinning with worst-case scenarios. Our house was 20 minutes from the job site, and every minute felt like an eternity. I kept replaying Owen's words in my head. "There's a man here. They told me to stay in the living room." They're being loud. What the hell was going on? Our house sat on a quiet street lined with maple trees, the kind of neighborhood where people knew each other's names and kids rode bikes until the streetlights came on. We'd bought it 4 years ago, a modest 3-bedroom with a big backyard that I'd turned into a showcase for my landscaping skills. The lawn was always perfectly green, the flower beds were meticulously maintained, and I'd built a small patio where we'd have family barbecues in the summer. I pulled into the driveway and immediately noticed an unfamiliar silver sedan parked on the curb. It was a newer model, clean, with out-of-state plates. Washington. My heart rate kicked up another notch. I got out of my truck and walked toward the front door, my work boots heavy on the concrete path. The house looked normal from the outside, nothing broken, no signs of distress. But inside, I could feel that something was very wrong. I used my key to unlock the door and stepped into the living room. Owen was sitting on the couch, clutching his tablet, his eyes too wide for a 6-year-old. He looked relieved when he saw me, but there was something else there too, confusion, maybe fear. He shouldn't have to feel those things in his own home. "Hey buddy," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Go to your room, okay? Play with your toys. I'll come get you in a few minutes." He nodded, his small face serious, and disappeared down the hallway. I heard his bedroom door close softly. I stood in the living room for a moment, listening. The house was quiet now, but I could hear movement from the back of the house, from our bedroom. Footsteps, hushed voices. I walked down the hallway, each step deliberate, my mind still trying to piece together what I was about to find. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. I could see movement through the gap, shadows shifting. I could hear Emmy's laugh, the kind she used to give me in our early days, light and genuine. And a man's deeper tone, saying something I couldn't make out. I pushed the door open. They were on the bed, not completely undressed, but disheveled enough that there was no mistaking what had been happening, or what was about to happen. Emmy's face went white when she saw me. The man, tall, dark-haired, roughly my age, wearing a casual button-down shirt, scrambled to pull on his shoes, his face flushed. For a moment, nobody spoke. The room felt frozen in time, like a photograph capturing the exact second everything fell apart. "Bennett," Emmy started, her voice cracking. I looked at the man, keeping my voice level despite the rage building in my chest. "Get out." He looked at Emmy, as if waiting for permission, which made it worse. She was still his priority, even now, even with me standing right there. She nodded, and he grabbed the rest of his things and left. I heard his footsteps in the hallway, heard the front door open and close, heard his car start up outside and drive away. The silence that followed was deafening. Emmy sat on the edge of the bed, pulling a robe around herself. Her hair was messy, her makeup smudged. She looked like a stranger. "Let me explain," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I stayed in the doorway, keeping distance between us. "You left our son in the living room," I said, my voice flat and cold. "While you were in here with him." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "Owen wasn't supposed to call you." That sentence told me everything I needed to know about where her priorities lay. She wasn't sorry Owen had been left alone. She was sorry he'd called me. She was sorry she'd been caught. "How long?" I asked. "Bennett, how long has this been going on?" She wrapped her arms around herself, looking down at the floor. 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of lies, of sneaking around, of looking me in the eye every morning and pretending everything was fine. Half a year of me working to support our family, while she was doing this. "Who is he?" "His name is Harry," she said quietly. "We knew each other before I met you. We worked together at that coffee shop downtown, the one that closed a few years ago. He reached out on social media, and we started talking, and you decided to have an affair." "It wasn't like that." Her voice rose defensively. "You're never here, Bennett. You're always working, always focused on the business." I felt invisible. "Harry actually listens to me. He understands me in ways you don't." The audacity of that statement nearly made me laugh. I'd been working 70-hour weeks to build a life for us, to provide for our family, to make sure Owen had everything he needed. And she felt invisible? "So this is my fault?" I asked. "I didn't say that. You just did." Over the next hour, the truth spilled out in fragments, like pieces of broken glass that I had to carefully pick up one by one. Emmy told me about how Harry had sent her a friend request on social media back in January. How they'd started messaging, just friendly at first, catching up on old times. How those messages had become more frequent, more intimate. How they'd started talking on the phone when I was at work. How they'd met for coffee one afternoon when Owen was at a playdate. She claimed she'd tried to stop it, that she knew it was wrong, but she couldn't help herself. She said Harry made her feel young again, made her feel desired in a way she hadn't felt in years. She said she loved him, that what they had was real, that she'd been planning to tell me eventually, but didn't know how. I listened to all of it without interrupting, my jaw clenched, my hands balled into fists at my sides. Every word was another betrayal, another lie uncovered. And the worst part was that she seemed to think I'd understand, that I'd see her side of things and somehow forgive this. What about Owen? I finally asked. Did you think about him at all when you were doing this? Of course I did, she said, but her voice wavered. Really? Because today you left our 6-year-old son alone in the living room while you were in here with your lover. What if something had happened to him? What if there'd been an emergency? He was fine. He was watching TV. He called me because he was scared, Emmy. He knew something was wrong. A 6-year-old had to make the adult decision to call for help because you weren't being a parent. Tears started rolling down her face, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no urge to comfort her. She'd made her choices, and now she had to live with them. I want you to leave, I said. Tonight. Pack a bag and go to your sister's, or go to a hotel, or go to Harry's place for all I care. But you're not staying here. Bennett, please, can't we talk about this? There's nothing to talk about. You chose him. You chose this. Now deal with the consequences. What about Owen? What about him? You should have thought about him before you brought another man into our bedroom. You should have thought about him before you put your affair ahead of his safety. She started to cry harder, and part of me, a very small part, felt bad for being so harsh. But the larger part, the part that had just seen his whole world crumble, felt nothing but cold fury. I'll call you about custody arrangements, I said. Through a lawyer. Don't contact me directly unless it's an emergency involving Owen. She packed a bag with shaking hands, throwing clothes and toiletries into a duffel bag without any organization. I watched from the doorway, making sure she actually left. When she was done, she looked at me one more time, her eyes red and puffy. I'm sorry, she whispered. So am I said. I'm sorry I wasted 8 years of my life on someone who could do this. She left without another word. I heard her car start up and drive away, and then the house was quiet except for the sound of my own breathing. I stood in the living room for a long moment, trying to process what had just happened. My marriage was over. The woman I'd trusted, the mother of my child, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. And I had to figure out how to explain this to Owen. I walked to his bedroom and knocked softly. Buddy, can I come in? Yeah. He was sitting on his bed, surrounded by toy cars, but he wasn't playing with them. He was just staring at the wall, his little face troubled. I sat down next to him and put my arm around his shoulders. So Mommy's going to stay at Aunt Rachel's house for a while. Why? How do you explain adult problems to a 6-year-old? How do you tell your son that his mother made choices that hurt the whole family? Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, I said carefully. And sometimes those mistakes are big enough that people need space to figure things out. But I want you to know that none of this is your fault, okay? You did the right thing by calling me today. Is Mommy mad at me? No, buddy. She's not mad at you. And neither am I. You're the best kid in the whole world, and I love you more than anything. He leaned against me, and I held him, feeling the weight of single parenthood settling onto my shoulders. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. We were supposed to be a family. We were supposed to grow old together, watch Owen graduate, maybe have grandkids someday. But Emmy had burned all of that down for a man who'd run out the door the second he got caught. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers and paperwork and sleepless nights. I hired an attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia who specialized in family law and had a reputation for being ruthless when necessary. I told her everything, about the affair, about Owen being left alone, about the 6 months of lies. We need to document everything, Patricia said during our first meeting. Get Owen's testimony on record, in a way that's appropriate for his age. Get phone records showing the extent of communication between your wife and this hairy person. Build a timeline of the affair. The judge will want to see that you're the more stable parent. I hated the idea of using Owen's testimony, but Patricia was right. What Emmy had done, leaving him unsupervised while she was with Harry, was negligent at best and dangerous at worst. The court needed to know. Emmy fought for custody, claiming I was an absent workaholic who'd neglected the marriage and pushed her into someone else's arms. Her lawyer painted me as someone who cared more about my business than my family, who worked long hours and left his wife lonely and isolated. It wasn't entirely untrue. I did work long hours. I had been focused on building the business. But I'd done it for us, for our future, for Owen's future. And I'd never once brought another woman into our home, never once betrayed the vows I'd made. The custody hearing was brutal. I had to sit there and listen to Emmy's lawyer tear apart my character, suggest that I was emotionally unavailable, imply that my first marriage had failed for similar reasons. But when it was our turn, Patricia presented the facts. Owen had called me in distress. Owen had been left alone while Emmy was engaged in an extramarital affair. Owen had been put at risk because Emmy's priorities were elsewhere. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, listened to everything with a neutral expression. When it was time for her ruling, she looked directly at Emmy. "Mrs. Bennett, I'm troubled by the circumstances described in this case. A 6-year-old child should never be put in a position where he feels unsafe or unsupervised in his own home. While I understand that marriages sometimes fail, your actions on the day in question show a serious lapse in judgment regarding your parental responsibilities." She granted me primary custody, with Emmy getting visitation rights every other weekend and one evening per week. Emmy's face crumbled when she heard the ruling, but I felt only a grim satisfaction. Owen would be safe with me. That was all that mattered. But I wanted more than just a legal victory. I wanted Emmy to understand the full weight of what she'd done, and I wanted Harry to face consequences too. I started by doing some research. Through Emmy's phone records, which her lawyer had been forced to turn over during discovery, I learned that Harry lived in Seattle and worked as a sales manager at a regional office supply company called Northwest Business Solutions. I found their website, found their HR contact information, and crafted a careful email. I didn't lie. I didn't exaggerate. I simply laid out the facts. Harry had been having an affair with a married woman, and during one of their encounters at her home, a minor child had been left unsupervised and had felt unsafe enough to call for help. I included the date, the timeline, and the court's concerns about parental negligence. I sent the email from an anonymous account and waited. 3 days later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Harry had been fired. Northwest Business Solutions had a strict ethics policy, particularly regarding conduct that could reflect poorly on the company. An employee involved in a situation where a child's welfare was compromised didn't fit their corporate values. I felt a dark sense of satisfaction when I heard the news. Harry had helped destroy my marriage. Now his career was damaged too. Next, I reached out to Emmy's family, not to slander her or spread gossip, but to tell them the truth about what had happened. The whole truth, including the part where Owen had been alone and frightened in the living room. I called Emmy's mother, Linda, a kind woman who'd always treated me like a son. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and welcoming. "Bennett, how are you? How's Owen?" "He's okay," I said. "But I need to talk to you about something important. About why Emmy and I are getting divorced." There was a pause. She said, "You two just grew apart." "That's not what happened." I told her everything. About the affair, about Harry, about the day Owen called me. I could hear Linda's breathing change as I spoke, could hear the shock and disappointment settling in. "She left Owen alone?" Linda asked, her voice tight. "Yes. He called me because he was scared." "Oh my God. Oh Bennett, I'm so sorry. We had no idea. I thought you should know the truth. Owen's your grandson, and you deserve to know what really happened." After I hung up with Linda, she apparently called the rest of Emmy's family. Her father, her 2 sisters, her brother. They were all horrified. The family that had once adored Emmy, that had celebrated her as the golden child who could do no wrong, suddenly saw her differently. When the next family gathering came around, Linda's birthday dinner, Emmy wasn't invited. Her sister Rachel called to tell her she wasn't welcome until she got her priorities straight and made amends with Owen. Emmy called me crying, asking if I'd turned her family against her. I told them the truth, I said simply. What they do with that information is up to them. The divorce settlement negotiations took another 2 months. We split assets down the middle, the house, the savings, the cars. I kept the business since I'd built it before we married, and it was technically a separate asset. Emmy got half the equity in our home, which I agreed to buy out over time with a structured payment plan. Owen would live primarily with me, with Emmy getting her court-ordered visitation. Child support was calculated based on our respective incomes, and since Emmy had no job, I'd be paying her a modest amount each month until she found employment. It wasn't ideal, but it was fair, or as fair as these things could be. But the real unraveling happened in Emmy's relationship with Harry. I learned about it from Rachel, Emmy's sister, who'd started keeping me in the loop about Emmy's situation out of concern for Owen. Rachel and I had always gotten along well, and she was disgusted by what her sister had done. Turns out, Harry had never planned to leave his own life behind for Emmy. He lived in Seattle with a long-term girlfriend he'd been with for 4 years. He'd never mentioned this girlfriend to Emmy, had never told Emmy that their affair was anything more than a fun distraction from his regular life. When everything exploded, when Harry lost his job because of my email to his employer, his girlfriend found out about the affair. She'd been the one to pack up his desk at work, and she'd seen the termination letter. She demanded the truth, and Harry, faced with losing everything, had confessed. His girlfriend had kicked him out, and suddenly Harry was unemployed, homeless, and dealing with the consequences of his actions. He'd blamed Emmy for everything, told her she should have been more careful, should have made sure her kid didn't call her husband, should have kept things under control. And then he'd blocked her number, blocked her on social media, and disappeared from her life completely. Rachel told me all this over coffee one afternoon, shaking her head in disbelief. She's devastated. She actually thought he loved her, that they were going to build a life together. He used her, I said, stirring sugar into my coffee. And she let him, because she wanted to believe in something more exciting than her real life. She keeps calling him, trying to get him to talk to her. It's pathetic. I didn't feel sorry for Emmy. I felt sorry for Owen, who was caught in the middle of this mess. But Emmy had made her choices, and now she was living with them. A few weeks later, Emmy tried to reconcile with me. She showed up at the house one evening, right after I'd put Owen to bed. I opened the door to find her standing on the porch, looking smaller somehow, diminished. "Can we talk?" she asked. "About what?" "About us. About fixing this." I almost laughed. "There's nothing to fix, Emmy. You destroyed our marriage. You chose Harry over our family. That's not something you can just apologize away." "He's gone," she said, her voice breaking. "He won't talk to me. He blamed me for everything and then disappeared. And now you want to come back. Now that your affair fell apart, you want to pretend it never happened." "I made a mistake." "You made 100 mistakes," I interrupted. "You lied to me for 6 months. You brought him into our home. You left our son alone and scared. Those aren't mistakes, Emmy. Those are choices. And you don't get to undo them just because the man you chose doesn't want you anymore." Tears were streaming down her face, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no urge to comfort her, no lingering love. Just a cold, hard certainty that this chapter was closed. "Please, Bennett. I still love you." "No, you don't. You love the idea of security, of having someone to take care of you. You love not having to face the consequences of what you did. But you don't love me. If you did, you never would have done this in the first place." She stood there for a long moment, crying quietly, before finally turning and walking back to her car. I watched her drive away and felt nothing but relief that she was gone. Months passed, and life found a new rhythm. Owen adjusted better than I expected, though he still had moments where he'd ask about Mommy and why she didn't live with us anymore. I kept my answers simple and age-appropriate, never bad-mouthing Emmy in front of him despite how I felt about her. She came for her visitation every other weekend, picking Owen up on Friday evening and dropping him off Sunday afternoon. Those exchanges were brief and cordial. We'd talk about Owen's schedule, any upcoming school events, whether he needed new shoes or had any doctor's appointments. We were civil, but distant, like business partners managing a shared project. Owen seemed okay during these visits. He'd come home with stories about going to the park with Mommy or getting ice cream. I never asked if Harry was mentioned, never pried into what they talked about. As long as Owen was safe and happy, that was enough. Emmy moved into a small apartment near her sister Rachel. She found part-time work at a retail store, struggling to make ends meet with her half of the settlement and the modest child support I paid. I heard through Rachel that she was lonely, isolated from most of her friends and family, still trying unsuccessfully to reach Harry. My business continued to grow. I hired 2 more crew members, a young guy fresh out of trade school who was eager to learn, and an experienced landscaper who'd recently moved to the area. We took on larger commercial projects, including a contract to maintain the grounds at a local business park. Money wasn't tight anymore. Owen and I were comfortable, secure, building a good life together. Owen thrived in his new routine. He did well in school, joined a soccer league, made friends with kids in the neighborhood. On weekends, he'd help me in the backyard, digging holes for new plants or running the hose while I adjusted sprinkler heads. He loved being outside, loved learning about how things grew. I started dating again cautiously. Nothing serious, just coffee dates or dinners with women I met through friends or at community events. I wasn't ready for anything committed, wasn't sure I'd ever trust someone enough to build a life with them again. But it felt good to remember that I was still a person outside of being Owen's dad and a business owner. One Saturday afternoon in late autumn, I was at a park with Owen, watching him play on the jungle gym with other kids. The air was crisp, the leaves were changing colors, and there was that particular quality of light you only get in October. I saw Emmy across the playground. She was alone, sitting on a bench, watching the children play. She looked tired, older somehow, though only 8 months had passed since everything fell apart. Our eyes met briefly. There was no anger left in me, no lingering pain. Just a quiet acknowledgement that we were strangers now, connected only by the child we'd made together. She waved hesitantly. I nodded back, a simple gesture of civility, then turned my attention to Owen, who was calling me over to push him on the swings. I jogged over and gave him a good push, listening to him laugh as he soared higher. This was my life now, these simple moments of joy with my son, building something real and lasting. That evening, after Owen went to bed, I sat on the back porch with a beer, looking at the garden I'd spent years building. The grass was still green despite the cooling weather, the flower beds were vibrant with late-season blooms, and the irrigation system I'd installed hummed quietly in the background, doing its job without any fuss. I thought about the question people kept asking me, was I okay? The truth was complicated. I'd lost the marriage, but I'd gained something more important, clarity. I knew who I was now. I knew what I'd tolerate and what I wouldn't. I knew that my son came first, always, and that anyone who couldn't respect that had no place in our lives. I knew that I'd rather be alone than be with someone who could betray me so completely. And surprisingly, I was okay with that. Emmy's family had slowly cut her off after learning the full truth. Her parents still saw her occasionally, but those visits were strained and infrequent. Her siblings kept their distance, especially Rachel, who felt personally betrayed by what Emmy had done. The family gatherings that Emmy had once been the center of now happened without her. Her friends, the ones who knew the full story, had distanced themselves too. Nobody wanted to be associated with someone who'd put an affair ahead of their child's safety. In our community, word had spread, and Emmy found herself increasingly isolated. She'd created her own exile, and there was a certain justice in that. I never saw Harry again, but I heard through various channels that he'd been let go from his new job in California as well. Apparently, word travels in certain industries, and his reputation had preceded him. Prospective employers did their due diligence, and when they called his references or looked into his work history, red flags appeared. His girlfriend had left him permanently, taking their shared apartment and most of their mutual friends with her. Last I heard, he was living with roommates somewhere outside Los Angeles, working a job well below his previous position, and generally dealing with the consequences of his actions. Emmy had loved him, truly loved him, and he'd discarded her the moment things got difficult. He'd never fought for her, never stood by her, never taken any real responsibility for his role in the destruction of my family. He'd just run. Sometimes, late at night when I couldn't sleep, I wondered if Emmy regretted it. Not just losing me, but losing the life we'd built together. The stability, the home, the family, the community that had embraced us. She'd traded all of it for a fantasy that evaporated the second reality came knocking. But those thoughts didn't linger long. I had too much to focus on. Owen's school projects, my business expansion plans, the new commercial contracts I'd landed for next spring. Life moved forward, with or without Emmy in it. The divorce finalized on a cold December morning. I signed the papers in Patricia's office, shook her hand and thanked her for her work, then walked out into the crisp winter air feeling lighter than I had in months. Emmy hadn't just betrayed me. She'd gambled everything on a man who was never going to choose her, and in doing so, she'd lost the one person who actually would have. That was her revenge on herself, and it was more thorough than anything I could have designed. I was free. Owen was safe. And that was enough. Thank you for watching the video to the end. YouTube may no longer suggest my channel to you, so subscribe to it to receive new interesting stories. You will also help the channel grow and improve the quality of its content. A playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to is now displayed on the screen. You can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.